Hello and very warm welcome to all of you in this edition of Public Forum. I'm Anurag Puneta with you. US President Joe Biden has decided to withdraw all American troops from Afghanistan over the coming months. And probably last US soldier would leave the country latest by September this year. And if everything goes accordingly and as per the plan. It is significant as this year it would be a 20th anniversary of 9/11 attack, which changed the world forever. War on terror was started after that. And this war on terror has been 20 long year, bloody and the costliest one, both in terms of human casualties and in terms of money. US has suffered deaths of nearly more than 2,400 American troops and cost the country around $2 trillion, leave alone thousands of Afghans who perished in this war. US was mulling though to come out of Afghanistan after bumping off Osama bin Laden in 2011. Previous US presidents like Barack Obama and Trump were giving hints, but finally Joe Biden has decided to leave the country. Though Pentagon had advised against the move, as there is a counter belief in US security establishment that the withdrawing would engulf Afghanistan in civil war, where the Taliban is stronger than before and where Islamic State and Al-Qaeda will lead it to become an international terrorism harbor once again. The peace talks between Taliban and US were going on since last many months, and Taliban had given the deadline of May this year. So will Taliban respect this decision, and will there be a lull in the counter-attack on each camp of Taliban in the US? Though US has accused Taliban of its brazen strategy to keep attacking on Afghan forces and close in on the key Afghan cities, and that has put the Biden administration in a kind of a dangerous political bind as well. What will happen would be interesting in coming months. What does it mean to Afghanistan's present political establishment and civil society? Will it not lead to a kind of civil war that Afghan has seen previous as well? And how it will change the relation between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and what impact it would have on India's interest in Afghanistan? We will discuss all these things in this edition of Public Forum. And joining me for the discussion, former ambassador and diplomat, Mr. Vivek Karju. Mr. Vivek Karju has served in Afghanistan as well. Very welcome to the show, Ambassador Karju, in Lok Sabha television. My second guest is Dr. Shriram Chaulia, international affairs expert. Welcome to the Lok Sabha television as well, to Dr. Chaulia, to you as well. But would begin with you, Ambassador Karju, to you. Biden has said in his address announcing withdrawal that he is now the fourth US president to preside over American troops' presence in Afghanistan, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and he will not pass this responsibility on the fifth one. We know that US went to Afghanistan in 2001 to root out Al-Qaeda, to prevent future terrorist attacks. But he says that we went there to accomplish that objective. And since then, the reasons for remaining in Afghanistan are becoming increasingly unclear, and keeping thousands of troops grounded there at the cost of billions of dollars each year makes very little sense. This seems pragmatic on the part of the US, but is it so simple as the geopolitics is concerned, in your understanding?
Look, the crucial decision which the United States did not take, because of which they've had to suffer the strategic defeat in Afghanistan, and I'm clear in my mind that it is a strategic defeat.
Okay.
That crucial decision was not to enter Pakistani territory to root out Taliban sanctuary. Mm-hmm. They did not harden the Durand line, mm-hmm, with the result that the Taliban, starting from 2003, were able to regroup and then make attacks in Afghanistan, mm-hmm, later consolidate their position, and mm-hmm, they kept the American forces engaged, mm-hmm, and then at bay, despite the fact that there was a surge during Obama's time, mm-hmm, of when US forces went up to 98,000 or close to 100,000 boots on the ground. So that crucial decision of allowing the Pakistanis to support the Taliban physically, to allow them to have sanctuaries and safe havens, has led to today's situation. Now, if they did not wish to take the decision, what alternative did the Americans have? And Biden is right. This decision could have been taken in 2011. At the latest, it could even have been taken earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
But the fact is, and this is where Biden does not, what Biden doesn't mention, that along with the desire to root out Al Qaeda, to ensure that Afghan territory is not used to attack American interests, especially the American mainland, through terrorism, there were other factors which came in, other objectives which came in, and those objectives relate to nation building. Now, nation building, to my mind, is an autonomous process. But people have to do it themselves. It can't be imposed. But the Americans went ahead trying to impose it along with their Western partners. And that was simply impossible in a conflict situation like in Afghanistan. So all told, this great tragedy of the last 20 years, and this tragedy has come after another 25 years tragedy in Afghanistan, where Afghan life has been completely dislocated,
Okay.
is on account of the blunders which American policymakers made all through and earlier, on account of the blunders, for example, the Soviets had made. And in some ways, one can see similarities between the Soviet predicament and the final Soviet withdrawal and the American predicament and the American withdrawal.
Okay, okay. But as you said that this was a strategic blunder and failure on the part of the US, but probably they were knowing right from the beginning about the duplicity of the Pakistan. So were they naive or they ignored knowing everything that the Pakistanis were doing?
No, I don't think they were naive. I think this was a conscious decision which they took, perhaps on account of the fact that Pakistan is a very large country. Biden himself told the Americans, I think he told President Karzai, that Pakistan is 50 times more important than Afghanistan.
Yeah.
He's reported to have said this is well known. So given that, I think their reluctance in taking on Pakistan was a fatal flaw in thinking and policy making.
Okay. Okay.
They could have. I do believe that they had the instrumentalities to put the squeeze on the Pakistan. They could have done it. But perhaps they didn't want to destabilize what they thought would bring about instability in Pakistan. They didn't want to go down the road. But, you can't fight a defensive war. And that is what the American policymakers imposed on their forces. I'll share this with you. I asked a commander of American forces in Afghanistan some years back. During the course of a seminar, I asked him.
Okay.
I said, can you defeat the Taliban without sending ground troops into Afghanistan? And he said, no. So I said, then why are you there?
Ground troops to Pakistan.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Chaulia, I mean, Ambassador Kajju is very clear that it was a strategic failure on the part of the US. I mean, they were knowing, they knew right from the beginning that without a complete support of Pakistan, it would be a very futile war. But when now Biden says that we cannot continue the cycle of this extending or expanding our military presence in Afghanistan and hoping to create that ideal condition for the withdrawal. And we all know that the ideal condition would never be, coming for US. So this was a kind of a pragmatic approach at this point of time.
Yeah, and the Donald Trump actually started this process by setting a specific date for withdrawal on May 1st. And that was part of the deal that he struck with the Taliban last year. So I think Biden, in many ways, was never a big supporter of the Obama troop surge also. When he was vice president to Obama, and what Ambassador Kajju was mentioning, and Obama brought it up to 100,000 or more troops in Afghanistan, Biden was not at all in support of it. So, he's in many ways, although he's quite different from Trump and is reversing many of Trump's policies on this matter, in a way, it's a continuation, because the only difference is he has given additional 4 months' time for full withdrawal, because had Trump won the re-election, he would have adamantly gone for May 1st, come what may. So I think Biden realizes that there is this jadedness and a tiredness. The America has basically lost self-confidence that it can fix the world's problems, and there is a lot of introspection going on about America's role in the world ever since Trump came in. And I think Biden has other priorities. The U.S. Intelligence assessment says that now the number one threat is China and China's global push for power. So that means Indo-Pacific is now likely to be the main focus, and in a way that's good for us, because if they are moving away from Middle East and from Afghanistan and redirecting their strategic energies to the main challenger or the main geopolitical rival, which is China, that is pragmatic as well as future-oriented. Then they're talking about Russia, North Korea, Iran. They're mentioning all these, and basically terrorism, which once used to be like a obsession in the US after 9/11, that has people have forgotten it. A new generation has come in, and they are no longer so stuck on that idea that we have to be there. They used to say that we have to remain in Afghanistan so that these terrorists don't come and attack us in the US homeland.
Yeah.
In other words, we are keeping them engaged there rather than allowing them to come and hit us directly on our doorstep. That used to be the logic. Now, I think basically they've given up. And for Pakistan also, what happened is they had a double game going, right? Like throughout. They were on the side of Taliban, but also so-called assisting the US. And like you said, the US and ambassador was saying the US did not call them out and did not really punish the Pakistanis for playing this double game. But now even that is over. For the game for the US is of course over due to domestic reasons and also because of their rethink about what is the main global priority. But the game for Pakistan is also over because they could milk the Americans for a long, long time. The amount of military aid that started pouring into Pakistan from Pervez Musharraf's time when Bush asked for support, and until now it's over 30-35 billion or more US dollars. That's how much they milk the Americans. They got IMF bailouts. They got a lot of benefits, indirect benefits, protection from scrutiny in international organizations, all using the US umbrella and saying, US, you need us for Afghanistan in order to stabilize. Now that the US is withdrawing, some people are saying, the Pakistanis are, celebrating, and the ISI is saying, we defeated two superpowers. First, we defeated Soviet Union with American help. This time we defeated America also with American help. They are trying to make a mockery of this whole thing. Yeah. But I don't think we'll have American help anymore after this. So, and there's also threat of the overflow of the jihadists on both sides, because there is a so-called Pakistani Taliban also, and they are feeling emboldened. They want to now increase their attacks, and they will want to join hands with the Afghan Taliban, their ethnic brethren, and try and carve out their own super state. Because remember, the Afghan-Pakistan border is not settled. So there are a lot of risks. I think Pakistan should not celebrate prematurely. Of course, America should not be celebrating at all. If they are saying we achieved our goals, they are just making a virtue out of necessity. The point is the US has failed, and I agree with the ambassador on that point.
Ambassador Kajju, you said, but probably it was a very, strategic failure on the part of the US, but probably the complete withdrawal would save American lives and American dollars. But don't you think it will also be costlier on the part of the US foreign or diplomatic engagement in this part of the region? Because complete US withdrawal would bring a smile on the face of Pakistanis, on China, and let's say countries like Iran as well would be happy to see that US goes out from this reason. So it would not be detrimental to US interest or US foreign policy in this part of the region.
Look, America's strategic defeat cannot remain hidden. Everyone knows it, that they failed to achieve all the objectives that they had in Afghanistan, and the fact that that a group like the Taliban, leave alone a state, a group like the Taliban was able to take them on and pin them down and force them to leave. So that message is clear. But there are reports currently that the US wants to keep a presence in the region in some manner or form, so that if they sense that there is some kind of a consolidation of international terrorist groups, then they can act. So I think they'll have to very carefully think their way through this, and they will keep some presence. But that really will not prevent the actors within Afghanistan of thinking that they have an opportunity now of achieving their ends, and these actors include the Taliban. But on Pakistan, I do think that the Pakistani objective was clear. First, to ensure that the Taliban again become the primary element within Afghanistan. And that frankly has happened. The Taliban are relatively a far more cohesive force than than the cohesion of the Kabul elite at the moment. And second, I think the Pakistanis' basic objective in Afghanistan is to ensure that they create a situation where India is kept at bay. Now, I think in the long term, any government in Kabul would want to have good ties with India. Any government, any legitimate government, and of whatever complexion. Of that, I'm certain, because the contradictions between Kabul and Rawalpindi / Islamabad are too numerous not to surface. But there will be an interim period which will be fluid, and that will be the period when we'll have to navigate our way to protect our interests in Afghanistan and in the region very, very carefully and adroitly.
Okay. Dr. Chaulia, what is the most likely scenario do you see in coming months after complete withdrawal in Afghanistan? Do you see the kind of civil war might engulf in the entire country, what we saw in early 90s, or would there be a kind of sense would prevail or not?
Well, one difference, Anurag, between then and now is that, there is this increased war weariness across the society. 90s, already there was more than 10 years of bloody conflict with the Soviet Union and then their exit. But still, they are the elites of major ethnic groups still don't see eye to eye. They often have a very parochial identity. They don't think of themselves as Afghans first. They think of themselves as first, or Uzbek first, or Pashtun first. So, or some smaller groups within each of these major ethnic, tribes and clans. So it's a, very divided society, and unfortunately more so because of the external interventions, where one side was playing off one against the other. So I think one thing that we should do to prevent this civil war scenario is the outside patrons. What happened earlier was that the regional powers, one side was backing Tajiks and Uzbeks, another side was backing so-called Pashtuns, and so on. So what happened was that created this, external support system for dividing, further division and splintering and fragmentation. So, secondly, weapons flows. Last time, because there was so much leftover weapons from the anti-Soviet jihad, that they keep on using those for decades and decades and keep on fighting. Kalashnikovs, it was legendary in Afghanistan in the 90s. And even now, I mean, you can buy Kalashnikovs easier than pomegranates on the streets in many parts of the country. So that kind of light weapons and all those smuggling. So I think very important that if we can contain those entry and exit points to this, although it's a very mountainous terrain mostly, that will be the challenge, because then we can try and limit this possibility. But there are warlords. There are many pockets of resistance both to Taliban and to central government. There are some who are like, fiefdoms and so-called feudal lords who do not accept the authority of anybody. And they are thinking there's a likelihood that they will become bigger and bigger in terms of being power brokers. Because even if there's an agreement between the Afghan government and the civil society and the Taliban on some basic compromise for a new system, it's not necessary that all these warlords will agree with it or will come. They are very opportunistic. They often keep changing their allegiance. So I think a new kind of Afghan nationalism is there, but especially among young people in urban areas who have experienced some modernity and liberal life in the last 20 years, women, minorities, they want a unified Afghanistan. And people are saying that if Taliban or any other group or warlord or even Afghan state or whatever is left of the Afghan state, if they want to reimpose the old methods of chauvinism, ethnic chauvinism, or extreme patriarchy and Sharia and these kind of things, it will not be accepted by large numbers of Afghan people, and there will be resistance. So in that sense, maybe there are some checks, both external and domestic, to prevent civil war. But I think the external actors should play a constructive role, because if we think in terms of only spheres of influence, then we are going back to the to repeat history.
Okay. Ambassador Kardjo, what is your take on about the likely scenario in Afghanistan in coming years? I mean, because we talk about, 1979 onwards, the day Soviets came into Afghanistan, we have seen not the Afghan identity or probably the Afghan pride. It is always the ethnic pride, or let's say ethnic identity, that somehow played a huge role. Either they are Pashtuns or Hazaras or Uzbek or Tajiks. And they have been fighting with each other. And probably this is the reason that Afghanistan has seen the continuous war. Do you see any change in coming years or not?
Look, ethnicity has been a part of Afghan political and national life. The fact is that during the period of the monarchy, there was Pashtun domination in Afghanistan. The Pashtuns were the dominant group. They co-opted the Hazaras, the Tajiks, the Uzbeks in varying degrees. The Pashtuns don't like acknowledging this, but this is a fact which I think is obvious. Now, at this stage, the other ethnic groups are not willing to accept complete Pashtun domination. They want their place in the Afghanistan. So the problem during the 1990s was also this, that the Taliban, which was then considered a Pashtun force, wanted to establish its rule. And even though it projected a pan-Islamic kind of identity, that we were all Muslims and ethnicity should be subsumed within that, the fact is that their leadership was Pashtun. It is today too perceived as a Pashtun force. And the other groups, the other ethnic groups are very wary of this. So the first reconciliation that will have to be made will be on political grounds, but ethnicity will have to be factored in these reconciliation processes. And that is a problem, because the Kabul elite, within the Kabul elite too, there is a sense that it is the Pashtuns who have the rightful place or the right to rule Afghanistan, and that will now have to be changed to a full participation in Afghan power by all the groups. That is the only way you can reconcile different interests, apart from, of course, the kind of Islamic theology that should be there, the kind of other ideological aspects of governance, and which will be. But more than that, in the immediate future, the question is whether the Taliban and the Kabul elite will be able to come to some understanding about the formation of an interim government through power sharing, which will lead to a great reduction in violence. I, for one, believe that if the main elements of the Kabul elite and the Taliban are able to come together, to come to an understanding, then the other groups that are there, or the kind of quote-unquote warlords, I've never understood what that really means, but quote-unquote warlords in Afghanistan who are there, I think they can be kept at bay. So this is a crucial element. As of now, the Taliban have given no indication that they are willing to go and talk, as was earlier expected, or is still expected in Turkey, to meet their Kabul elite counterparts. If that happens, then I think the path will be good. Everyone will be required to show a degree of flexibility. But if that doesn't happen, then there are major imponderables. There are major questions about the future.
Okay. Dr. Chaulia, Taliban has been, has become quite emboldened in recent time, and they have also promised to renew attacks on US and NATO personnel if the foreign troops are not out by the deadline, and they have given deadline of May this year. But now in September, when the US would be probably be out completely out of Afghanistan, will they respect this time as per your understanding, or they might launch a counter attack on US or not NATO forces?
No, I think, see, the departing Western forces may not be attacked much, because anyway they are on the way out, and Taliban have the so-called strategic patience. Their victory is not in physically defeating or killing Americans or Europeans. Their victory is in simply outlasting them. So for as far as they go, they fought for more than 20 years, and now just another additional 4 months. I don't think practically they will do that. They would want, because if they attack, then then the US, for its pride, will have to counterattack.
Yeah.
And then the decision of September 11, 2021 departure may again get postponed or delayed. So I think they'll play it craftily. The problem is not so much attacking the Western forces. The problem is the attacks on Afghan civilians and on the Afghan National Army.
Yeah.
Because that is where the Taliban have been very, very brutal and ferocious and unrelenting. And they think that it is necessary to establish their influence even in the peace process through violence on the ground. So the parallel peace process are going on. I would say that it's very important we go back to the region, to look at the broader region, and to bring in other players. At the Raisina dialogue, Dr. Jaishankar had a very interesting conversation with Jawad Zarif, the Iranian foreign minister, and Hamdullah Mohib, the Afghan national security advisor. That looks like a bit of a triangle that is forming: Iran, Afghanistan, India. We have a common interest through Chabahar. We want them. We want the Taliban and other factions in Afghanistan to believe that that Afghanistan will benefit from the transit fees, the commerce that is going through the Arabian Sea and all the way into Central Asia. We want all these stakeholders, from Hamid Karzai to Ashraf Ghani, or many others in the region who believe in peace and stability of Afghanistan. We have been saying that Afghanistan can be a transit and a bridge for commerce and trade across Central Asia, Middle East, Eurasia, and South Asia. That should be our ultimate goal. And I think we should be experimenting more. Even with Chinese, people often say, of course, China will go with Pakistan because they want to counterbalance India. But on this, because of the threat of jihadists moving out of Afghanistan, in China, Xinjiang, there's a threat. So we should be sanguine about some kind of grouping, smaller groups, regional formations, to try and maintain this stability. Because otherwise, if there is no outside involvement in the transition after the US leaves, we may end up with all the worst case scenario of civil war, state collapse, refugees, drugs, and terrorists moving forward.
Okay. My final question to you, Ambassador Kajju, what impact it would have on India's interest in Afghanistan? Though India has been in good relation with Afghanistan, I mean, we have a cultural relations with Afghanistan. But this triangle of Afghanistan, Iran and India, Chinese are trying to play spoil sport. Well, in terms of they have been putting a lot of money, they have been buying the loyalties of Iranians as well. We know that. And probably they will start injecting money in Afghanistan. So in that war, India may not be in that position to counter. What interest India would have in coming years, and what is the best scenario for India to remain relevant in Afghanistan?
That your last point was very valid. What do we need to do to remain relevant in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
That's very well put. Look, I'm not very sanguine that Iranian interests and our interests coincide in Afghanistan.
Okay.
Yes, to a degree, but we can't rely on that. The situation is unlike the 1990s when Iranians' interests and ours and the Russian interests coincided to a large degree, and we acted in concert. It's not hidden from people that we acted in concert to safeguard our respective interests. So this time around, it's a far trickier situation. We've got to navigate our way through, and I have believed very, very strongly, and I've advocated that for that navigation, we have to be in close contact with all the powers in Afghanistan. And the primary group at the moment, whether we like it or not, is the Taliban. And we are the only major country in the world which has shunned the Taliban. I've never understood the reason why we do it or what great objective we secure through this.
Okay.
The Afghan authorities are themselves talking to the Taliban. They want to talk to the Taliban.
Was it a failure on part of us, or let's
No.
say, was it a failure on part of us, or if not a failure, let's say, unpractical approach on part of India, not to open a channel to have a dialogue with Taliban?
Oh, certainly. Certainly. I have said this time and again that having a dialogue with someone doesn't mean that you are endorsing them.
Okay. Okay.
The fact is that everyone is inviting the Taliban, talking to them, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians. The Americans have signed a deal with them, even though they lost 2,400 men and women.
Okay. Yeah.
What purpose has it served? What purpose have we served? What national purpose interest purpose has been served by not talking to them? By putting all our eggs in the gunny basket?
Okay.
So the time has come when we must actively talk to the Taliban, convey to them our concerns, convey to them directly. Yes, they have close contacts with the Pakistanis, but that should not deter us. In Afghanistan, the one lesson I learned from my association with our Afghan policy in different phases was that in Afghanistan it is necessary to talk and talk openly
Okay.
to everyone. Everyone talks to everyone. You don't shun anyone. And I hope the government will do that now and do it very strongly.
Yeah, that is the kind of message to India to start dialogue with everybody in Afghanistan if India wants to remain relevant in Afghanistan, because Americans are going out and this would leave country in a very treacherous path. What happens, we don't know for surety. But how things turn out in Afghanistan would also be very, very important for India. How Indian government deals with the new situation would be very interesting to know. As Ambassador Kardju suggested, that at least Indian government should be open enough to have a dialogue with every player in Afghanistan. Because Afghanistan, as a strategic point, is very important for a country like India. Thank you very much to all my guests for joining me and talking to us, to Lok Sabha Television. It's a pleasure to have you in the show. That's all we have in this edition of Public Forum. Thank you very much for watching.